So now we start the last block for today. So 2 more talks coming up next. So first is Thomas Gelf talking about Icinga Director. I can't wait to see it. It's the first time for me as well.
Yeah.
So it's your stage.
Thank you. Well, welcome back. Thank you for still being here. My name is Thomas Gelf. I was born in the Italian Alps in South Tyrol, so they speak a very weird language there, so I moved to Franconia to learn real German. And usually, well, they're very happy when I talk English, because then I have to think about what I say and have to speak slower. I work at NetWare since 2010. As well, primarily as a consultant, so I'm traveling around the whole year long, and I'm doing a lot of prototypes. Usually, sitting at the customer, you want to do something quick, some integration, something the customer needs, and over the years you build a lot of stuff. And Icinga Web makes it very easy for me to do modules, to integrate other tools. Honestly, I do not care about the tools. I do not care whether data comes from Icinga, from Graphite, from wherever. I want to have it in one place, or to reach it with just one single click. If I make a kind of an integration that's just a link pointing to where the customer wants to go from that object, that saves a lot of time and costs nearly no time. Just one hint, if you want to learn more about writing modules for Icinga Web 2, and the NetWays Git, there is a little bit hidden, right now German instruction, but very well done instruction, explaining step by step what you can do, how you can write modules, and so on. And, well, I wrote a lot of them. Many of them are public right now, some of them are already stable, and I have much more prototypes right here. Today we're talking about the Icinga Director. The talk is structured in a very simple way. I'll show you some slides, do some fancy demo, go back to the slides, and so back and forth. And, well, I do so till I'm out of time. I'll show you what this director thing is, or why you should use it, and where you can get it. And this is, well, it's pretty easy to answer this. It's a very powerful config tool for Icinga 2. You should use it because it's, well, fancy, sexy, and very fast. And, well, you can download it from GitHub. It's there. And I will tell you some more details later on, but I'm already using it in productional environments, even in pretty large ones. Well, at least it's sexier than the old Nagios-like Word. This is the current dashboard, and we'll try it out live right now. Just what you see here is an overview of all the objects you have. It's very nice because, for example, even in an environment right now with like 200 and something or 200,000 historical single changes, it takes like 50 milliseconds to present you this dashboard telling you that since your last deployment there have been 9,800 single changes and you have 3,000 single services, well, plus a few tens of thousands of apply rules or generated by apply rules, and there are a lot of details hidden in this site, and the colors change a little bit, not on all the icons right now, but that's the entry point, the dashboard where you start working with the director. Before we try it out, a very short piece of history. The first commit for the Icinga Director happened in April, a little bit more than 10 months ago. And we had 2 days earlier was the kickoff meeting in Nuremberg, where we talked about what this tool should look like, or what we want to design this for. I'll just very fast show you a few slides from that kickoff meeting, just to give you an idea of what we planned, and then I'll go to show you what we have right now. It's German, I'm sorry. Just to give you an idea, we had different audiences we wanted to target, like you, the Icinga admin, you are the one with control of the system. You are you understand the system. You build everything. You would like to abstract things, but you do not want to change every single threshold. If someone is using 99% of a single disk, and then writes you mail, please load the threshold because I'm getting warnings again, and I cannot free the disk and so on. That's not a job that requires your level of skills, let's say. Then we had a code name for a target group called Windows admins. Those are the ones that just want to say next, finish, choose Microsoft MS SQL Server monitoring, fill in 5 to 10 drop downs, and then click on save, and that's it. And then they want to have their system in production. Well, we had DevOps people, and these are the ones doing automation and so on. We had a codename ITIL for those having one or many CMDBs with different grades or with data of different quality. And we had the legacy customer. That's the one who has something that already works and would like to migrate, but do not want to do the whole work again from scratch. This is an ASCII art picture of how such an environment could look like. Here you see that we have multiple satellites on different continents. This is from a real customer. It was a little bit larger. We have one or multiple masters, and we are talking, this is an old one, over an API to the masters. At that time, we kind of reverse engineered the core protocol and talked Icinga protocol to the masters. Right now, we have the API on the same port. We have a REST API, and that's what we are using right now. We talked about templates and permissions and so on. Just that's a nice slide here. For example, I see a check command, how I run it in command line. This is the business process check, so I check a specific process. Bernd showed you in his slides how the processes look like. You can check every single node, so you can basically define such nodes or such processes, even with hundreds and thousands of nodes. It's pretty fast. And then you can say, okay, I want to alarm one specific business unit for just one subnode. This is what you're using this tool for, and you're basically running checks against that tree and scheduling them like any other check. And then it's you can have alarming, or that way you get also history for the up and down states of the process, so you can do SLA reporting. That's what I often do, or use this feature for this business process model to get SLA reports for processes. It makes no sense to have an SLA report for 3,000 single routers. We're doing that also, but it makes not much sense. This is how such a command could look like in Icinga 2. And Icinga 2 doesn't have a real configuration format. It's a DSL, a domain-specific language. It's code. You can write anonymous functions, lambdas. You can really code in Icinga 2 configuration. And writing a config tool for something like this is pretty challenging. That's a simple one. Here you can see I have the command splitted, so all the parameters are escaped. There is no security risk because escaping is done the right way. And the problem is you have to define this somehow and offer configuration forms for that kind of objects. These were the first drafts how this could look like, and we said, well, we define a check command, have a specific type, and I do not want to offer a form where you create an array as a user. That makes no fun, so I want you to just write the command, and it should a little bit help or assist you in using these commands. Then, of course, you have to add parameters, and going a little bit faster through this. The idea was that as soon as, for example, here I have a placeholder variable config, and as soon as I use one variable, it should automatically suggest me to provide a field for that parameter, so you can write a nice name for your users, allowing them to fill in those parameters. That were the initial ideas. It's a little bit complicated because there are plugins with thresholds like this, so you have the critical round trip time and the packet loss separated by comma, and there's a person sign and so on. So for historical reasons, we have to deal with a lot of realities abstracted in various ways. Well, that's it more or less. This was just to give you an idea of where we started, what we wanted to achieve, what we wanted to do. And oh, I forgot one slide. The most challenging thing we wanted to accomplish was we had all those kind of users we wanted to target, to address, and we wanted to solve it for all of them at once, of course. So doing automation, having a CMDB, having Puppet running, getting users from the Active Directory, other users doing manual configuration, and all of this together without breaking things. So that was where we want to get, or where I believe we are pretty near to that goal. It's already very nice. Okay, getting started with the Icinga directory is very, very simple. Ben told you that we wanted to have configuration reduced as much as possible in Icinga Web 2, and that's what we do with the Icinga director. You create a database resource in Icinga Web. It can be PostgreSQL or or MySQL. Since this night, both of them are again at an equal level. During the last months, Postgres lagged a little bit behind. Right now, they are equal from a feature level, and they will remain so. And well, you tell director about the database, and director itself cares about the rest. For example, I heard that many of you are using Puppet. Director tries to help you doing configuration in an idempotent way, so you can create, or some of our customers are already doing so. Say, I want to have an exec command doing director database migration. This means create a database schema and make schema upgrades automatically. Since we started with director, we did something like, well, nearly 80 database migrations. And since a month or so, we're doing all of them automated. And we did a lot migrations in the last few weeks. That's it. You say run the migrations only if there are migrations pending. So that's a very simple command line tool giving you the information execute 0 or 1 if there are migrations or no. And if the execute is true, so 0, then it would run the migrations, and that's it. So this means for those who are not using Puppet, this execute is not running if there's nothing to do. You have no report, you have no action if there is no reason to do a migration. So when you roll out a new or just version of the director, just do a git pull, and there's a new migration file, you will see a report in your Puppet Enterprise frontend in Foreman, and you see, oh, there was activity on the Icinga server. It is a migration. That's fine. All here. There's more, but let's try it out. Let's start in the web frontend. I have the director here. Let's show you the configuration. Modules, director, can you read it? More or less. The configuration is just one drop down, and you choose a database resource. For those who have never seen this before, you can manage resources in Icinga Web 2. You have LDAP connections, SSH keys, and so on. This is a central component in the web frontend. And so I have many databases here, go to the director and say configuration, choose one database. You see here it is director, blah. So let's take the console. I drop the database and I recreate it. So do not do this at home, kids. And now I get the console on the web server. These are different servers, database server and web server. And I run Icinga CLI, director, migration pending. If I do a - help, then it explains me what this command is all about and already shows me how I could use this in Puppet. If I run pending, then I see execute 0, so yes, there are migrations pending. Okay, that's fine, let's run the migrations. I had no schema right now, so it created the schema. These are 68 or 69 tables right now. Let's run migrations pending again, and you see that the execute is 1, if you can read it. So it's an error, there's nothing pending, so the Puppet definition would not run the migrations. Nothing happens if I run it again and again, run and run, it doesn't destroy anything. So that's all. If I then go back to the web interface and open the director, then I see a wizard popping up asking me to do my initial deployment. You do not have to do this. You can manually create your API users and endpoints and so on. It's also showing in the menu that you could run the Kickstart wizard. Of course, we are doing automation, so there's also something for this on the command line. There is a subcommand called Kickstart, and if you want to use this, it's perfectly, there's a documentation explaining this, so if you go to GitHub to the repository, there's a link pointing to the automation and there's everything explained what I'm showing right now. Basically, you can have an ini file telling the director where to connect. So this has to be one of your masters usually, or your single Icinga node. Oops, I'm sorry. This host name shouldn't be here. Sorry. Well, no, it's a customer, but it's perfectly okay if I show it because they are doing a lot of activity on GitHub and so on. So they are also, for example, they published a Icinga Foreman integration module on GitHub and so on. So they are pretty open source oriented. If you know that customer, it's okay. It should not happen with everyone, but yeah. I created the configuration. I told him where my Icinga 2 is running, and I ask whether the kickstart is required, and it says, well, exec code is okay, so yes, run it, and the command is just run. It has a documentation like the other one. This takes some time because it does a lot of things now. It connects to the, it created my object. We can watch it while it is doing if you're fast enough. Oh, it already, yeah, it's halfway done. You see it created a lot of commands, and right now it is finished. It imported all the existing commands. I enabled the ITL and all the additional commands that are available. It created objects like referring them in the director, because it's a little bit tricky to work with an Icinga 2 instance having a known configuration, not generated by the director itself, still allowing you to use those objects. So that's what basically happened right now. It created, let me show you, an API user, and it created a zone. Oh, my master well had too much of them. Usually you have a master zone and a global zone for director. And it created one endpoint object, and this endpoint object has been assigned the API user, and this means that I can, well, do things like inspect it. So this is something like the Icinga Studio, where you can go deep into the core and, for example, have a look at your checker component. There is one of them, check the status and so on. So this is just to play around. This is not the basic responsibility of Icinga director. He created a lot of commands. That's more interesting. And for example, you can choose one of them, and you see that it imported, well, that's an ugly one, all the parameters. And let's make it a little bit larger for you. I got this through the API. It's not that easy because I'm not able to get everything, but right now I got all the parameters. And this is not just JSON. If you have a look at the commands, I got all the parameters as single parameters. I can click at them, I can modify them. You should not do this with a so-called external object. Right now I allow you to do so. I'm not sure whether I will in the future, because this is an external object. This means this object is not going to be rendered, it's not going to be deployed. But if you want to create services and hosts using those commands, you have to have them available in some way. So that's what that initial Kickstart daemon did with its synchronization. Well, then that was the Kickstart. Director wants to make configuration easy for you, and let's begin with our main, target audience, the point-and-click users, and those who want to get things done fast and easy. You've seen a lot of commands and parameters right now, but this still looks pretty complicated. You know what I'm showing you because you know Icinga 2, but it's still very technical stuff. So, next live demo. Let's do some clicky thingy. I have commands. So no host right now, no services. Let's create some. I create a new service. Object type. Right now I'm only allowed to create a template, an external object on apply rule. There's one thing missing, real objects. And there's one rule, and I think a director, I'm very strict about this. You're not allowed to create single objects not using templates. Because this will later on make it very easy for you to create restrictions and permissions and ACLs and so on. So you could, for example, allow those, let's call them Windows admins, to use just 5 templates, and all of them have not even 3 text forms, but just drop downs, and they are not allowed to do anything wrong. It's just one idea of how you could use this. So we need to first create a template. Let's do it the old Snuggish way. Just create a generic service. Forget about the agent right now. We define no command for the base check, but we want to execute active checks. And these are default settings, but just to have more options visualized, set it here, and I create a service. You can now preview the service, so it shows you the configuration it would render. You can go, for example, back and say, just for fun, set a check interval like every 15 seconds and retry every 5 seconds, and no passive checks, set them to no just for fun, and I have no event handler, so this is default also off. And it's also pretty cool, so it changed everything, and if I have a look at the history, oh, there are a lot of hidden helpers. For example, if I write, I want to check this every 2 hours and 5 minutes, then it calculates this, and if you render it, and it renders it in a way that Icinga 2 understands it. Having a look at the history of this object, I see that Tom did 3 modifications. He created the service. Let's hide this one so I can enlarge it for you. And I travel along. I see that I changed the check interval, enabled those single settings, and so on. So what the director also gives you is an audit log of every single change you're doing. I can show you the former object, so that's the object, how it looked like before the change, and the new object, that's the current one. What's still missing here is a button to click to say restore. It's just, it was a matter of time. I've been coding the whole night, but that button will arrive. So right now there's no single point and click restore. You have the history, but it will arrive. It's pretty easy to do. Everything I need for this is already there. Let's do the same with a host. Oh, maybe a little bit longer. A template, I create a generic host. Here I already choose a check command. Let's take the host alive command, and well, same game as before. I want to execute the commands, and that's it. Now, of course, I can also create a real host. If I now add a host, I'm allowed to create a real object. So you see the difference. If I choose a template, I have a lot of possibilities. If I choose the object, I'm, for example, not allowed to, in this example, change the host, check command, and so on. Right now, this is a predefined set, and I'm still evaluating different ideas of how granular we could do permissions on this. And we have a lot of very crazy ideas. So if you have something in your mind already, what you would like to have, let me know today, or open a ticket, a feature request. The director is already pretty powerful, but it starts right now. Now it is ready, you can use it, but there are a lot of things we could create based on that platform. Okay, I want to inherit. The import is a required field. I can inherit a generic host, and okay, the host name is required, that's true. Let's call it localhost 1. Give it an IP address, or no, well, let's start without an IP, and then let's add an IP address. Let's pick one of those, add a display name, and of course also here we have a history, and we see those changes, and the object creation, and so on. If I go to the preview, right now this is an object that's inherited from another one, so I can show this object fully resolved. These are all the properties. These are the properties sitting on this object. This also works fine if you're inheriting from multiple templates, inheriting from other ones. I do not know what kind of abstraction you're using right now. template files, lconf or whatever, but have a look how easy it is to find out what this host will look like. I love it. Okay, of course, I'm here at the host. Let's remove the display name, whatever. If I go back to the dashboard, right now there's my first deployment. It doesn't tell me anything. Let's have a look at the deployments. And this is empty right now. What you see right here works perfectly, but I would like to change it. You see a preview of the configuration, and you can deploy this configuration to the master. What's also very nice is if so I would like to change the way how I present this information. You'll see a preview later on, but this is basically the rendered configuration. And you will have a look at this, you can check it. I would like to have a whole diff to the current running configuration right here. I have more ideas for this view. But in the meantime, your coworkers are doing changes. It doesn't matter. What you see here is going to be deployed. There's a one checksum, and I am going to deploy this configuration to the master. It was too fast, it's already deployed. If you have large configurations, you see a wheel spinning here. The configuration is on the master, this is the startup log, everything was fine. And it rendered 4 files, and well, they were very small, but I'm doing this right now with configurations for a very few thousand hosts with like 3,000 services synced from PuppetDB all the time, and other 30,000 services generated with apply rules and so on. It works pretty good. And also, let's do something else. Let's do a change. Go back to the host, change the IP address. Now immediately there appeared a deploy button, and it tells me that there has been one single change to this object. It would also tell me that there have been 5 changes to 6 other objects or whatever. And in the menu, I also see that there is one change that happened since the last deployment. This also works at the same speed if you have like a few 100,000 changes in your history, and there are a few thousand that happened since the last deployment. Try it out. I prepared a lot of housekeeping mechanisms, but right now I didn't publish them because I wanted to find out how much data this tool can stand. Let's deploy it again, and you see, second configuration, and this one has the new IP. If you, for example, find out that, well, the config was generated, it was rendered, it was deployed, then everything is fine. Let's deploy another one, a broken one. Let's create a new host. Oh, that's hard. How can I break this one? Let's change the template and say I have no check command. That's the easiest one. Store it and redeploy. And now I see a broken config because Icinga is complaining. And I have a lot of files here in my log that's from different experiments. They usually are cleaned up. What I see here is a config error. It's telling me that, well, there is one error and I have no check command attribute. You see it here for that host. So this is a configuration error. And the config here, you see it bold, is still running. The second one is still active, so nothing bad happens. The Icinga is still running. But you could decide that you messed up everything. The running configuration is wrong. It's green. It has been deployed, but it's running the wrong checks. So you can basically go back to the first one, go to the configuration, redeploy it, and now you have once again the configuration from down here running in production. Oh, and you see now I have 2 pending changes. Why? Because the last deployed configuration changed, so the changes I did in the meantime differ from the configuration running right now in production. So I could generate it once again and deploy it, and now, okay, it's the broken one, will not work. Let's fix this.
Excuse me?
Yep.
Can we see the difference now with this?
Between the whole configuration? Right now, no, because the generated configuration can be, the customers where I'm working right now with this tool in production, they have a few megabytes of configuration, and the problem is the browser is going to be, well, to make your laptop noisy if it's loading that much data. But it will come back in a way that if you have a look at the deployments, you see all the single configuration files, and I prepare code to show you how many different variants of that file existed in history, so you can choose to make diffs of single deployed files. Right now, no, but you're not the only one who want to have this. The more features you give to people, the more they want to have. So. For example, I can also have a look at the last related activity. So every configuration shows me which was the last activity that had led to that configuration. And in this case, that's correct. The broken configuration, and this one points to the change that removed the check command. Oh yeah, that's easy. That's correct. I would like to have a link here that's still missing. So I have to manually go to the generic host. And let's choose the check command host alive once again, store it, deploy it, and everything is green, it's running. And of course, if I have a look at the overview, the host is here. It has 4 unhandled services because I still have local apply rules on that Icinga node, and of course they have been applied. So you could also work with configuration on your Icinga node, working together with config in director. This is a little bit tricky if you have multiple masters. So I'll show you the link later on. For one customer, no, for 2 of them, I created a module, pretty simple, called File Shipper. So you can ship your own custom config files through Director. It will not parse, it will not understand them, but you can write configuration code that could not be done with Director right now or maybe forever, because I'm not going to point and click Lambda functions and such a list of if-else conditions. So you can ship those files through the Director, and you do not have to care on which master to send the configuration and so on. So that's not your problem. So you could still write manual configuration while taking profit of the understanding the Director has from, well, your environment. If I go to the host, it's also pretty nice. There are action hooks. I have Graphite and other ones here. Let's go to modify that node, change the IP address. Oh, I have a change, cool. Let's deploy it, that's it. Yeah. Or go back to the host, modify it again. Let's clone this node. I want to have localhost 2. Localhost 2 has another IP address. Deploy it again. Oh no, I do not want to have it. Delete it. And okay, I have nothing to deploy because that's the former config. Fast enough? Okay, that was part of the click voodoo. There's more. But that's nice, but most of, for example, the customers I'm working with are doing a lot of automation. Puppet, other tools, and I personally did a lot of things with Puppet. I'm one of the very rare Puppet certified developers on this world. The certification does no longer exist. There are 2 operations you can do in Director. They're called import and synchronization, and these are different tasks. So I do not want that everybody goes to reinvent the wheel and tries to find out how to sync his Puppet configuration right now with the current state of that object in Icinga, diff all those changes, find out whether it should deploy or no in an idempotent way, and so on. That's crazy. And as we heard before, if you're doing this only at every Puppet run, you could be half an hour or even more late with your change. And the deployment of that web server took place a minute after the deployment happened on the Icinga server. I do not want to have it that slow. Depending on how fast your data source is, you can check or compare it once a second. Once every 10 minutes, doesn't matter. And only if there are changes, you could deploy them. Or what's still missing, I would like to have some GUI or some way of configure this in the web front end, so allowing you to say, well, that source should be synchronized every 10 minutes, and if there are changes, I want to have them deployed, but only in the time range, only once every hour or something like that. If something goes flapping and changes all the time, you do not want to deploy every second. And okay, sync is throwing data there, and then you define rules for synchronization, how to sync all the data. If you export resources with Puppet, Then collecting them is very slow if you have lots of them. But it's very fast to ask the PuppetDB for a specific resource type and tell him, well, give me all the exported Icinga resources. This takes very few seconds, even if you have thousands of them. And I just import them. And if there's a change to my current config, I could deploy or not. Or you could have my manual view or audit on the changes and then deploy it. So I used once in a very large environment Director as a one-to-one drop-in replacement for exported resources, formerly collected by Puppet, now collected by the director and deployed in a controlled way. These are screenshots. I don't know if you can read it. You see different servers I played with. You say my form and operating systems. I used it at the data source for a specific drop-down for manual configuration is in sync. I'm syncing from another IDO database that has changes that could be deployed. I tried to import lconf commands. It didn't make fun, but it imports something. I had some duplicates on one specific source, there are errors and so on. I'm importing from different PuppetDB databases, one very old, one in a test environment at NetWays, one very new one in a Puppet Enterprise VM and so on. We have, for one customer, we did a rec tables module talking with the director, providing all that data as a data source. So this is modular. You can provide custom data sources for sync, and all it has to do is just give me a bunch of data. Structure doesn't really matter, because later on you define sync rules, like here, and depending on the source, I can give you a drop-down or not, giving you all the available options. Here I see all the Puppet facts, and can say, well, I want to have the operating system in my vars operating system. Usually I import application tiers, environments, and that stuff. I also created syncs, syncing all the Puppet variables exported directly in the hosts. So this means that you have a change on every run. I did it for quite some time just to find out how much data I can collect. Because you have free memory, uptime, all those facts changing all the time. Such huge custom variable definitions on all your hosts you have, it works. With structured data, recursively, with diffing everything, the director is able to do something like this. Oh, this is one of those nodes. That's just a screenshot. That's just part of the config. And well, every single Puppet run triggered or gave me new data. You can do this. I wouldn't in production, but it makes fun. Oh, okay. One very important question. Does it have an API? Sure, everybody has. So it is a REST API. It is its main objective is to make work easy for you. So, let me show it live. These are just screenshots from the online documentation with a lot of examples, and so let's just do one live example. I prepared a little helper. It's just a shell script. You can find this in the documentation, so you do not have to type it down right now. It's just a wrap at the curl, and it takes 3 parameters: the HTTP method, the URL, and an eventual body, and then it does a curl request with or without a body. So I can, for example, say curl director. What was it name? Localhost 1? I don't remember. No, it gives me 302 not found, so no, this was the wrong one. No, I'm sorry. I wanted to go to the browser. It is localhost 1. Oh, yes. Get? Yeah, sorry. I get the object. I can use a lot of parameters, like, for example, I want to resolve this object here, so I say I want to have it resolved. And of course you get it with all the properties. I can post or set single parameters. Post means set only those parameters you define. So I can extend this object, and I say my vars. I'll set a specific var. and you immediately get the results and information that, yeah, you had this one, everything fine. If I post this one with another host, it complains because there is no host matching that filter, but I can remove the filter here and say, okay, I want to have an object name, localhost 2. You are forced to define an object type, so whether this is a template or a real object. And I want to have a real one. So let's create an object. And now it creates a new one, and you see the HTTP code is 201. So you do not have to look at the body, just have a look at the HTTP status code to find out whether what you did a change or not. If I post the same thing again, I get an error because I tried to recreate the same object. But I can right now pass the host name again, and it gives me 304 not modified. Then let's change the variable, and it says 200 OK, and I had a change. Once again, no modification. Let's set another variable. You see it extends the object, and let's add an IP address. Everything fine. And if I now go to override the whole vars, I say just give custom variables. Then they have been overridden. If I change this, and instead of, let's say, using post, let's put this one and just keep the vars and nothing else. Put is a method allowing you to do some kind of atomic operation. So your object is going to look exactly like this. And now it has dropped all the other properties, and it has exactly this state. You can, you can try to cheat, use wrong methods. It always tries to give you a well-formatted JSON answer, and so you can trust HTTP code. And if there's an error, there should always be an error body telling you the details. If I delete this one, let's first check if it really exists. German hosts. Sorry, I'm wrong. Director. Hosts, and here is localhost 2. That's fine. Delete it, and I will not even click reload. It should auto refresh in a few seconds. Yeah, it's gone. And well, that's it. That's the API. Very short. You can also do something like post config or director config deploy, and you will trigger a deployment through the API. So you could, for example, say post object properties. If you get a 200 change, then run a deploy, and otherwise, if there is 3 or 4, so no modification, do nothing, and maybe deploy the next time. So you do not have to use the import rules and do this controlled by director. You could also do all the automation parts with your custom scripts running against the API, but you do not have to take care, or you do not have to think a lot about checking differences and so on. And yeah, this is where director tries to help you. Well, these are for example, this way you can get deployments a lot faster. For example, I did an example with users from LDAP, and I have been at the national bank somewhere, where they have all their knowledge in LDAP trees, so also the host definitions and puppet classes and everything is there. It's not that nice because having structure in LDAP is not so flexible. But LDAP is fast, so I did a prototype just for fun, syncing every second. It works. As soon as they change something, the configuration is here. You should first ask if you are going to hammer your CMDB once a second, but try it. What about the time? Okay. A few slides about the architecture. We have seen some details before. Basically, director talks to one of your master nodes. It is more or less aware about satellites and agents, or at least it tries to make you make your life easier if you're going to configure those objects. Who of you is using Icinga agent? And the other ones, why not? It's a little bit complicated, but I try to show you how easy it is with the director. Internally, the protocol it uses to talk to Icinga is the Icinga 2 API, so basically certificates, SSL, RTLS, REST, and yeah. The director does not ship single objects with that would result in single config files. That's too slow if you're going to sync thousands of single objects, so it's basically just doing a plain config dump. So it generates plain text config and ships that one in different files. And what Icinga does internally is it creates a stage directory, validates that configuration. If that configuration is fine, it switches the active stage and reloads internally. Otherwise, it keeps its configuration and puts the startup log and the exit code in that directory. So what the directory is doing, fetches startup log and exit code and writes this to its database so you can keep this forever. I did some attempt with shipping partial config changes. This would not work through the normal operations on API objects, because it would create me config files that would conflict with my ones. But I tried to use the Icinga 2 console through the API to do live changes to existing objects. So one idea we could do tomorrow would be to do single changes, those that are possible to do at runtime, immediately without deploying, and if you deploy the next time, you have it in the configuration. And I think I would forget it because I did it only with the console at runtime in that core. I tried it, it works, but it's not really necessary right now, but it could be a feature in the future. Communication paths, basically it works like you have seen on the initial kick-off meeting slides. Director talks to one of your masters. It has to know which one your mastered zone is, and it loves to have a dedicated global zone. So it's per default, you can always override this. It deploys commands and templates to the global zone, and all your nodes should get them. And then it deploys, for example, only the hosts and services for agents to their parent zone. And you can configure this in various ways with the agents allowing configuration or config sync. Then the agents would get the commands definitions from the parent. If you do not trust that model, you can manually or with Puppet or however deploy your command definitions to the agents, and their parents are just allowed to schedule the commands and give them parameters for the defined commands. So if you want to have it secure, you can do it that way, but of course you have to maybe not allow all the commands, because if you allow the parent to run check by SSH, then you're open once again. You can run both scenarios. You could also, for example, say, well, I would like to have what director does, creating all the configuration, but I would like to manually check it somehow. So you could download the configuration for the agent or do it in an automated way and ship it through Puppet and have some security engineering checking your configuration or whatever. This would be possible. You can have both ways. If you want to have the agents running as standalone Icinga instances, scheduling alone, and having a completely own configuration with own host and service objects, then you have to do the configuration of all the dependencies manually in the director. But it does not assist you with creating all the endpoints and zone objects on the fly. So right now, to have an agent, you just change the flag, this is an agent, and it would work. Let's show you this one. Let's create a new one, a new node. I call it Elastic1. That's one container I have running here. Give it an IP address. It should be this one, I hope. And no, let's do it even better. Let's create a template first, but that's what I normally do. And let's call this template agent, or agent node, or whatever. And no address. I could set all parameters here, or I should just inherit them from generic host. And oh, I found a bug. Now you see, there was one refresh missing. You see here all the properties have been inherited from the generic host. I can override them or go back to the inherited one. This works also through multiple levels and works also with plain text fields, and you would see a placeholder telling you who is the parent with which value. Don't I have a check interval in generic host? No. Okay, let's change this. Check interval 10 seconds, retry every 5 seconds. Create another template inheriting from that one. And here you can see that's, yeah, that's a refresh bug. I broke something. Okay, let's use the agents, and now you see the refresh. I have the check interval 10 inherited from generic host. I can say 12, or no, go back, remove 12, and I still see the former one. Of course, I need a name. I told you that I want to have an agent template. Let's go to that node. And just to show you that I'm not cheating, do not do this at home. And well, I run the commands. And right now, this node established a connection to my master nodes. You see it here in the command line that that part here requests the certificate to be signed. It uses the ticket and it creates the key with its own name, and that's it. You do not have to use this, but you can, because it helps. And it generates my Icinga configuration. So this is just one example. You can configure it in another way. Let's throw this away. What it creates is a very basic configuration, just logging an API in order features, and it's configured except config according how you created the agent. If you do not trust the director, you should double check this. It created your zone, the parent zone, the global zone, and that's it. And right now I can start Icinga 2. My master right now doesn't know anything about this agent probably, so if I have a look at the log. Oh, sorry. Okay, it doesn't even connect with, I configured it to wait for the master. So let's go back to the host. It has changes, so it's telling me that there are 15 pending changes, and only one of them has been applied to this object. Okay, that's fine, deploy it. And the master has been deployed, has the configuration, and now has a look. Let's have a look. Elastic 1 is here, it's pending. Let's wait a little bit. And check interval should be something like 10 seconds, plus multiple ping attempts. Okay, it's green. You see it, and well, that's it. Host alive is okay. It should have some services, and I guess, no, I'm sorry. There's no service right now running on the agent, but this would definitively work. And so I'm running out of time. That's how you work with the agents. With satellites, if you have different regional zones, if you have one config master with different zones sitting at customers or different continents working there alone or centrally configured or whatever, then you can override all the director's decisions where to put configuration. So what you basically do is, right now it puts agent definitions in the master zone and config for the agents in the global zone. If they accept it, it's okay. If not, they are on their own. And you can say, okay, I create a template. That's my European zone, and European zone has one, or the template European zone has the European master, and that's it. Assign the node, tell the nodes to use the template, and they will be deployed to that zone. Well, out of time. And just a few ideas how you could use the director. If you have lots of data sources, try to use the director as your very own single source of truth. I have customers with lots of CMDBs, and it's nice to, you can create sync rules using different import sources and say, well, use the IP address from that source, but use it from the other source if it's there, and you import the agent if that property has that value, and otherwise import something else. So it is a lot of click work, because you have to define every single property in the front end. Check it out. You can try it. I'm just running out of time, I guess. Yeah. 1 minute. Woo. Okay, the director is very extensible. So currently there are 4 hooks. There's data type. If I'm allowed to do so, I would like to show this. Import sources are modular, so even the existing ones, like importing from LDAP, from SQL, or from the Icinga core, are implemented in that modular way, hooked in, so you can have a look at them, try to find out how they are implemented and create your own ones. I created, for example, import sources talking to specific APIs at customer DBs, or we built one for rec tables, for example. I guess this will be public sooner or later. You can have property modifier. That's pretty cool. If you import from a data source, like you want to have all your users and groups from your Active Directory, you have a problem with the member of property is a distinguished name, and that's very ugly. You could create your groups with distinguished names in Icinga 2. It works perfectly, but it looks ugly. So you could use a modifier. Right now there are substring and strip domain and regular expressions and so on. If they are not enough for you, it's very, very simple to create in our own module, put the file in the right place and let the director know about it, and then you can have your very own modifier, picking the first organizational units from your DN or whatever. Ship config file is a hook I'm using in 2 modules. I'm using it in the file shipper module. You will see the link later on to ship custom config files through the director. It doesn't care about it, just ships them. And I'm also using it in a prototype for the director. For the business process module, because business processes have own config files, and they are point and clicked and created on the web server, but I want to have the checks running on the masters. So I can basically misuse Icinga to ship other files, and then you tell the check command to use that file shipped that way. It's a hack, but it works pretty good. Can I make one last short demo?
Whatever.
Okay. Is okay? One last. Data. Because I completely forgot or had no time to show you. We have a lot of commands, and the commands have a lot of parameters. Just one simple example. Let's take the MySQL one, is my favorite example. Has a lot of parameters, and well, I want to allow the user to configure them. So what I'm going to do is I say I want to offer fields. It offers me all the custom variables in that command. So I can say, oh, the database should be a parameter. Let's call it MySQL database. You can see I did it before. It can be mandatory or no. So I can say this should be a mandatory parameter. And you can create other ones and so on. Let's pick the check mode. Where is it? Here. Plugin modus or whatever, that's also mandatory. Okay, if I were now going to create a service using that check command, it looks a little bit ugly zoomed like this, but I guess you can see it better this way. I take the MySQL check plugin and immediately get those fields to fill in. So your users are allowed to not define custom variables, but they can define exactly those fields in custom variables you allow them to do. So let's use a generic service and fill MySQL database is test, and the plugin modus is whatever, connect. And, oh, okay, I need a name, of course. And this should not be a service object, but an apply rule, and so on and so on. Let's go to store this, preview. And this is what the object looks like, can be resolved. You can create assign rules, and so on. Funny thing is, as we are talking about data, that data fields can be managed. So you can say, oh, plugin mode, that's nice, but this should be a list, a drop-down list. So I could modify this and say, one moment please, this is not a string, this is an SQL query. You see Jalokia and business process hooked in. I can choose a data list and create a list right here with a list with the entries of all the values that user is allowed to fill in. And I'm also using this, for example, to synchronize customers from an external source. I could use them directly via SQL, or just say, well, sync them to a data list and use a data list in a dropdown, and that's it. So it will require some work, but it's in the long run it will save you a lot of time, because you can tell your people, well, do your configuration. You cannot break anything. The worst thing they can do if you didn't check something, they create a broken config. It will not reload, and you will see it. Okay, and the last field is one data type. It's called SNMP credentials. Let's call it SNMP. Caption, just it should be nicer. Oh, there's an error. I have a module here, very simple one. That's stupid. It's just creating SNMP credentials. It looks ugly. I can say version 3. I say use authentication protocol, privacy, and so on, and I get a database with credentials. And in the directory, if I'm going to use this, I say, well, my Elastic or my agent gets a field, and that field has to be SNMP. It's mandatory. And if I go back to my agent, the field is here, and I cannot store without filling it, so I have to choose one of those credentials. And if I store it, I have to cheat right now, because I showed this before and found a bug. I just have to change the database. This is a bug in the other module, but right now you see it this way. I generated a config with a lot of data. The user is not allowed to see the configuration. It's just allowed to fill in the data, to choose from the top down, and you extended it with your very own logic, bullshit, whatever. You can fill data. You do whatever you want with those modular data. Okay, more than out of time. Thank you for still listening. Try it out, use it. I guess no time for questions.
Kind of. So if you ever ask yourself how a database feels if you stop the import of a dump. Take some time. Questions? Perhaps 3 minutes or so.
You kept talking about Puppet. From a CMDB point of view, any plans of integrating, for example, I don't know, Ansible Redis fact caching from a Redis database? Or
sure. If you, I don't know, want to have a module importing JSON, YAML files, whatever, doing a database query, whatever you want, it's basically you need to create an empty module for a single Web 2, create one class file with one single function called fetch data, and you can do whatever you want. And in the hook you can do more things. If you want to have your data source configurable, then you can provide form fields for the configuration and so on, but basically just fetch data, do what you want. Have a look at the data sources in the directory itself. They are implemented exactly the way you have to do it in your modules. Or PuppetDB module is an example. It's a very rough module, but it works. It's on GitHub, and yeah.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thank you.